Okay, so welcome everyone. We are here actually to talk about sustainability in data centers, and particularly we will actually start with focusing on why standardization is needed in the carbon assessment across data center fleets. And that's going to be our focus. Now, a little context over there. So, in order to have carbon assessment of our systems, components, etc., what we very normally hear the methodology that's referred to as Lifecycle Assessment, LCAs. So you will hear the panelists talk a lot about this term LCA. And one of the key ways to standardize is to have a product category rule, PCR. So that is another term that you will hear our panelists speak about quite a bit. Product category rule is essentially defining some of the rules and guidelines of how the carbon assessment should be carried out, right? And hence, it is standardizing how LCA, that is life cycle assessment, which gives you the carbon assessment result. It's standardizing that. So just to keep these two terms very much in mind so that when folks are speaking, we are aligned. I would like to introduce our panelists here. Let's start with Alan. So Alan Deng, he's a lead for the Google Net Zero team. He focuses on decarbonizing supply chain and very closely works with a lot of suppliers, drives a lot of initiatives for reduction of carbon in the supply chain, also closely works with the carbon footprinting team and helps quantify Google's Scope 3 emissions and hotspots for carbon reduction, etc. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you.
Next, we have Bahar Riazi, again from Google. She works with the tech infra carbon footprinting team. So I guess Alan and Bahar work closely. And she works for actually having the LCA assessment, which is which gives us the carbon result. She works for having the LCAs done for a number of the components, including a lot of storage components, drives, HDDs, SSDs, etc. She has a decade-long experience in LCAs. Prior to Google, she was working with Apple with their LCA team. So clearly see these folks have had multiple hyperscaler side experience here. She also has a PhD in environmental engineering and master's in chemical engineering. Third, let's come to Lisa. That's Lisa Rivellin. She's from Meta. She's a system engineer with the hardware design team at Meta. She works closely with data analytics and AI in order to have design hardware systems that are more optimized. She leads the effort to reduce carbon in IT via server technologies that have lower carbon impact. Previously, she also worked on a digital twin in order to model based on ML model what is the optimized design and operation. And even previous to that, she's been a research scientist with Lawrence Berkeley Labs. She has a very interesting educational background. She has a PhD in applied statistics and energy. She has a master's in engineering and an MA in history and philosophy. Yes. And last but not the least, we'll come to Ines Souza. She's from Microsoft. She's basically focused on advancing industry-wide effort in order to align how actionable and scalable environmental impact and carbon impact can be determined, and hence, very appropriate to be with us over here today. She also works on impact assessment of different methodologies for the entire carbon fleet, IT fleet, and works on strategic partnerships in order to decarbonize supply chains. She also has close relationships with suppliers and working very closely with them, and previously worked at the LCA, for LCA determination at Google with their Net Zero team. So another instance of, yes. She has a PhD from MIT in LCA for product design and a master's in environmental and water quality engineering. With that, welcome all the panelists. I would love to start everyone off.
How about yourself?
Oh, yes, of course, me. Thank you. I have a very short introduction, hopefully. I am with Azure Microsoft, so the cloud provider. My main focus is the storage services on cloud provider side. And I mainly have two areas of focus. Anything that is creating efficiency in dollar or creating efficiency in carbon is sort of falling into my very interesting realm. I do have an MBA from Berkeley and a master's from Georgia Tech. I'm also the steering committee rep for sustainability domain of Open Compute project. Yep. With that, the first and foremost question for all of our panelists over here, I would love if some of the panelists would like to speak about why is it that it is so critical to standardize the LCA, which is the carbon assessment in our industry? And if that is missing, how does it hinder our progress, or how does it hinder the industry comparison of carbon? Go ahead, Bahar.
So a standard approach to carbon accounting is critical for the data center industry for several reasons. First, it ensures comparability. So without a consistent methodology, comparing different LCAs is like comparing apples to oranges, making them non-actionable. Second, because of the credibility. So why do we use LCAs? Because of their high quality, because of their accuracy in helping us to identify the hotspots, to track the reductions. Again, the result of LCAs are highly dependent on the allocation method we choose, the choice of functional unit, which system boundary are we defining, and lots of other LCA modeling assumptions. So again, we need a consistent methodology to have the LCAs that are comparable and actionable. And this can be achieved with the creation and application of product category rules that you mentioned, or PCRs. And it will enable cross-industry comparison. It will help us to prioritize the data we need to basically collect, fill in the data gaps, and estimate our current emissions to report, even forecast our future emissions. So I want to emphasize again, the lack of such a standard method will hold back the entire industry's ability to have meaningful and collective progress towards sustainability.
Somebody would like to add? Yes, Dennis, go ahead.
Yes. I second that. Of course, the comparability and the credibility are essential. Really, what these LCA standardized through PCR for specific type of products in a data center for specific type of equipment really allows all the stakeholders, the customers, the suppliers, the partners, the regulators, really to speak a common carbon language. So we are all really focused on reducing the emissions rather than debating about the numbers or reconciling numbers. So to your point, the comparability, for example, I mean, without standardization, one company's low carbon SSD footprint might be calculated with different assumptions, with different system boundaries, data quality, all that really makes it that the other companies or low carbon, low impact SSD, they're not comparable. There's no comparability, not only on the footprint, but then really on the action. There's really hinders collaboration as well. So it's essential, and to your point also, really builds credibility if we know that we have the same framework, working with the same numbers. Just another point on, I think it also, at the industry level, it brings efficiency. So when we have a product category rule that tells us how to conduct a lifecycle assessment specifically for these type of products, let's say SSDs, that makes it so that the companies and the stakeholders really, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We really have the same approach. We can refer to that approach, and we can use our resources to reduce emissions rather than disputing the numbers. Even one step further, if a company or a set of companies, they figure out, let's say, an improvement at the manufacturing level, and that is scalable, right, to the industry-wide scalable, again, because we are using the same approach and the same numbers. And then finally, there's also regulatory pressure. There are regulations that are coming up in the EU, but also here, well, in California, and they're requiring the scope 3, so the embodied carbon measurement to be reported. And standardization is critical to have that regulation ready, so there's no confusion, and there's, again, the comparability, consistency, and credibility. So a lot of the same, but yeah, just to kind of add to that.
I agree with both, and one thing I also want to add to this umbrella here is that it's not just about technical comparability, which is one thing which is very important. It's also about the collective commitment that the industry really wants to push forward for sustainability. So on the hardware design, when we design new racks, we don't have the incentive, or we did not have the incentive before, nor the tools to actually include sustainability as a criterion. Mostly it's about total cost of ownership, different perf efficiency, or whatever things we need when we design a new rack. Here what we want to add is really all the framework to integrate sustainability as a criterion for decision making when we create new racks, for instance. And so we work collectively on that new framework to make sure that we can go ahead and push that. And I start to see the changes in our teams. Previously, the sustainability efforts were actually coming to engineering teams to say, hey, what about sustainability? Have you thought about reusing components? And the data was not really helping to make any decision. Now we're starting to see that it's the other way around. Hardware designers integrating sustainability and asking us about how should we calculate. And the question about why now, I think that the boom of AI and the fact that we have a lot of demands for new hardware is shining a huge spotlight right now on the impact of buying so many components. And so a lot of questions arise, what about sustainability, what are you doing? And so this is the right moment for us to create this framework.
Awesome. I did forget to mention one thing is that we would love if anybody has a question, feel free to raise your hand so you can interject with your questions. Don't need to stay till the end. Yes.
Hi, I'm Wayne Adams. I was presenter last session, and I was driving our industry association with a device power measurement tool, and I always saw the vision that it could going all the way back to MIT as part of some of the roots around LCA, it would get connect those dots there. And so I would encourage one or more of your members to take a look at. We just achieved state architecture, which means the membership loaded it, so we could take that forward and become the lowest common denominator that manufacturers to your design engineers at the procurement level, and we're willing to take it up to the ISO level if you make decisions outside of the boundaries of the U.S. around the device selection, or if you want to more uniformly compare that. That same tool also allow you to capture custom workflows such that if you have something more unique that you see in the style of businesses that you read, that our test measurement tools would allow you to just take a new workload and drive it through there and end up with that. That was the vision, was it lowest common denominator to characterize more device behavior at the procurement level within the supply chain. Just hit the magic milestone that supply find it resilient. Understood about that, but it's now out there for your
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that comment. Yes.
I think it's great that you guys are working together on this. The real question though is, how successful have you been as a group trying to drive these kind of standards to GDPR, the EU, California, you were saying before, US, and Canada, China? Are you going to be able to get them in line to accept the same kind of rules, or are they all going to do their own special thing?
So as we speak, we're working together on this. We actually are going to also, at the upcoming OCP, we're going to be there with the group. And on the side, now part of OCP, have a official kickoff of the product category rule. So it is, these type of efforts are not like a 2 or 3 weeks or months. They're like a 2-year long, unfortunately. But there's a lot that has been done that we can actually accelerate that timeline we need to. These are part of, obviously, industry standards, voluntary efforts, particularly these PCR at the system level for data center equipment. The goal is to transform into the OCP spec, so really get that channel of adoption. And then the goal for these type of instruments, although they're voluntary, they can easily be they can be referenceable, by regulations, by other bodies. So there's definitely a goal of the standardization to look into different channels, both geographically and in terms of stakeholders, industry, regulators. The PCR process is a very open process, so there is a public consultation. So just like other standards, really wants to open up to make sure there's adoption. There's not something that we're writing in and we store it somewhere. So we want to make sure that that process is really inclusive and active and proactive to get input so we can drive adoption.
Awesome. Thank you. Johannes. I would like to move. Oh.
Sorry, but
Yes.
as I see data center equipment today, especially SSDs, we're being driven to support multiple power performance levels, which will, of course, have an effect on the usage part of the carbon model. And we're also seeing that with standardization improvements, that there's actually a life cycle extension. This is an unholy matrix for your measurements, I would think. How are you dealing with this?
That's a very good question. We do include, so we're dealing with that different ways. So for the life cycle extension, what we do is we calculate what we did not purchase and what actually, so we do extend the life of certain components, including whole servers actually. And so we have a whole calculation methodologies about how much servers would have we bought if we did not extend the life. And we have pretty good metrics about carbon savings using this methodology.
And if I may add, I just want to say it's again another really good example of showing the importance of having a standard approach. What if I'm using a totally different approach? So we all need to make sure that are we including the use phase? How are we allocating? So again, this collaboration together is really important for everyone.
This, I think, also touches upon, sorry.
Just want to add something. So on that note, exactly. So there's the use phase. So the PCR that we've been talking, it focuses on the embodied carbon, but there's the use phase piece, right? And we do need to have a system understanding of that use phase. So there are efforts to actually bring to life. It's kind of a nested, there's a PCR at a semiconductor level that is actually going to nest into the system level data center, and then it's going to nest into a cloud services, which is so operational and embodied. So just kind of get back to the standardization effort. And like you were saying, we all are accounting, the extended use life, the the second life, right, or the recycling. But there are different allocation methods. The ISO standards, the LCA ISO standards, they point to the different ways. But yeah, if we're using different allocation methods, or they have been evolving in recent years for the circularity initiatives, then yeah, we need that standardization to compare apple to apples. So that's why these efforts are really critical, and we are on it, so we can actually have a coordination and consistency.
Do you have an assumption that end of life means recycle, or do you expect second use reuse? Because I know like GDPR says we should be doing second reuse, but I don't know many data centers, yourself included, that will let drives out because you're mixing all kinds of data, and admittedly you do it at rest encryption, which is great. But at the same time, I don't know that you would let these drives out for second reuse. Or do you just literally send them to recycle?
I can speak a little bit to that. Everybody might be doing it very differently depending on business, and but I think in Google perspective, we do treat them very differently. We do have extended life use, and we do have recycling and reuse harvesting the equipment when it's end of cycle, or return it back to the vendor so they can refurbish and have a second life to it. But I think that's kind of unique to different data center hyperscaler dealing with it depending on the business needs.
That's my concern, is that if you're assuming recycle or reuse, like a vendor, you turn it back to the vendor gives it a new life. How does that figure in? Because you can hide a lot of sins of initial carbon footprint of a piece of hardware if you say that this piece of hardware might have a 5-year life, we only use it for 3, but then we turn it over, so we get to erase the sins of those last 2 years.
Well, that's to the point that we were referring to the allocation methods. So the carbon benefits, there's different methods, like very simply explained. There's the method where you allocate those carbon benefits to the first life. There's another method that you actually allocate the carbon benefit to the second life. And then there's methods as one from the European environmental footprint, where you do 50-50, or you balance both. So there are different methods, and they bring different incentives. They bring an incentive to recycle content. They bring an incentive to make it recyclable. So there's different scenarios and different approaches, and to that point, the idea that a PCR focused on a specific type of product really mandates or enforces, okay, we're going to use these particular allocation method. And then that's a much better and consistent way to deal with these different scenarios. I think another important piece is that depending on the business models, depending on the situations, they might, one size fits all. So another aspect that PCRs really enforce is transparency in terms of okay, we use this allocation method, but this is why, and this is what the parameters, so we can understand the sensitivity of results when we compare the data.
You get what I mean, that you can hide a lot of sins uncovered by saying the second life is getting.
Yeah.
Yes, that's why we need to be transparent about what we're doing.
Yeah.
Right. Consistent. Yes.
In terms of transparent and in favor of time, I would also like to move folks to another aspect of the discussion. So thank you so much for going into detail on what you are collaborating on. I would also like to sort of bring up how are you working with suppliers? How is your organization working with suppliers to actually leverage this data in order to help Second Life, etc.? And also, how do you see the standardization of PCR help supplier fatigue?
Yeah, I can talk to that a little bit. I work in Google's Net Zero supplier engagement team. Our team work with the supplier every day. So we have a very deep understanding of the challenges to get the right kind of data from our suppliers. And our approach to engage the supplier is really focused on strengthening, build a strong partnership. And I can give you 3 examples how we do that, right? First is some of our suppliers just don't have the technical capability to build product LCAs. And we're fortunate, Google's fortunate to have a carbon footprinting team. Bahas is one of them. And when it's possible, when it's needed, we actually can offer our expertise to help our suppliers to build those, to either develop or improve the product LCA so we know what we're getting from them. It's matching our standards. Another example is that a lot of time when we work with our suppliers, we incorporate their actual operational data into our LCA, into their product LCAs. And so they know what they building is for Google products, so we know exactly what's coming in. And then we can also incorporate their suppliers' carbon reduction initiative or impacts and reflect that in the product LCA. So we can properly recognizing our suppliers' effort, and that actually give us the credibility to claim things in the Scope 3 reduction, right? Sorry.
Figuring out their carbon emissions. What are some of the metrics that you're using? Like how does a supplier of hardware, how are they mandated to calculate their emissions?
Yeah, so that's kind of our third example is we're working with hyperscalers here, and we are developing standard LCA methodology, and we communicate that clearly to our supplier. And so they know this is somewhat of a upcoming common ask from their customers. So by knowing exactly what they need to do, what kind of data they incorporate, that allow them to do their product LCA a lot more and faster, right? And this also allow us as customer to have a very high fidelity, more granular Scope 3 and PCF reporting. So by doing all these things with our supplier, we're building trust with them, we're building collaboration with them. You talk to some of the data, it's like operational data, for example, it's like how much electricity do they need to consume in a particular manufacturing of a component in a particular factory, and hopefully that's a factory that's producing product that's shipped to Google, so we know exactly where it comes from. And if that electricity is using 100% renewable, then we know exactly what the carbon reduction impact would be, right? So it gives them a lot of clarity that the end result is our supplier, by doing that, they can actually very accurately attribute their greenhouse gas emission to a customer like us, because they know exactly which product shipped to us, right? They can also very accurately attribute their carbon reduction impact to which customer, so we know exactly what's happening in our Scope 3. And that, to us, is a huge improvement from the spend-based or production-based kind of peanut butter spread approach to allocate GXG to customers. And I think that's a huge incentive for a supplier when they get recognized for that effort, and then they'll further their decarbonization work. Hopefully that answered the question.
Awesome. Anybody else want to add thoughts?
Yeah, just a quick add. So to the point of this panel on standardization, consistency, and common approach, and to all that you said, Alan, from the supplier viewpoint, if we have that standard, that overlaps also with data exchange standards, but if we have that standard from the supplier viewpoint, you don't have to go customer by customer understanding the carbon accounting rule. They know per PCRs how we are all, and I would say more on a partnership relationship, not that how we account for the the carbon impacts on a specific type of product. So kind of to the point of the fatigue, that really streamlines communication and again focus the energy and resources on what matters, reducing the emissions rather than trying to reconciliate the numbers among all customers.
Yeah, supplier fatigue is very real when they're different customer asking for different things. And when we talk to our supplier, that is very visual and very to us, because they say, why are you asking one thing in one way and asking different thing in a different way? And my other customer asking for a different way and allocate it in a very different way. So we saw a lot of supplier fatigue.
Mm-hmm. Yes. No, go ahead.
did you also allocate in staff? And what I mean by that is that I know that some of you have played with this idea of over-provisioning your data center by, let's say, 8 or 10% because you know that every year you're going to lose 2%. And by over-provisioning, you can actually never have to service anything but stuff in place. In that type of model, not having staff replace things, not buying equipment that's hot swappable, for instance, and simply having stuff fail in place may be a valuable model. And do you guys have any way to illustrate that?
Not that I'm aware of on my side,
I
no.
mean, how often does power supplies fail? What if you deploy all single power supplies on servers? You can save a little bit of power, you can save a lot of hardware. But you could have a failure rate of 5% per year. But if you bought 5% more, does that actually save you? And then not have to have staff? Is that something your model?
Yes. So it's outside of the standardization effort, so I can explain exactly what we are doing. The way we account for life extension is the rest of my colleagues here have said through the common methodology that we're trying to build together. Now about fail in place, it is, I would say, a given when you actually extend the life of some servers, because what you want to do is extend the life of your server after the guarantee and then let it fail if it's not replaceable. So we do have a list of things we can actually act on and others we can't. So we are not having less staff. That's not exactly the way we see that. It's more about the capacity we're saving to make sure that we can rebalance the load if something is failing, but we still have sufficient buffer in place. So we do have models that are very, I would say, accurate, that my team is working on actually, on predicting exactly the server failing rate, which is by type of servers, because we have some new servers, we don't have enough data, so it's a long process. With that, we create a buffer of possible extra capacity that we can use to rebalance the load. But we're not using that to have less staff. It's more about making sure the products work and we can extend the life as much as we can. So there is a sustainability question here also, which is if you fail in place servers, how much buffer do you need to purchase, and is it a good sustainability decision?
Right.
Most of the case, yes, but we have models for that. Yes.
And I know we touched a little bit upon, some specific storage components and, reuse and recycle for those components, challenges around that part. There's another aspect where I also wanted to touch about how does the industry see that this can be scalable? Like how will the LCA be scalable at a fleet level? And how would we model future scenarios, based on the entire fleet? Like whichever panelist wants to approach that first.
Yeah, I can start it in you. Okay. Well, we're actually collaborating also in an effort to, so we've been discussing standardizing LCA for a specific component or system. So this effort is really to, and all of us have been applying a methodology and had to scale to the whole fleet with thousands of components. So all of us have to really have the challenge of applying LCA at scale. Now, you cannot conduct an LCA in every single component or configuration manually. You have to automate it. And all of us have been working on different on approaches that we are now collaborating and really actually are in an effort that we want to open source how we approaching this scaling effort of LCA really, and that which requires the standardization. We can describe the components in the same way, the emission factors, so we can replicate, and this replicable algorithm that we can apply using LCA, standardization in the heart of it. So we have an effort that we also will talk more about LCA at scale, that exactly allows to scale the what we cannot do manually, component by component. But maybe, Lisa, you
Yeah.
can speak more. We have been working together on this as well.
Yeah, so the problem with that project is I tend to go too technical. So
Yes,
the-
at high level. Okay.
The reason why we need to work with automation when we work at scale is the massive amount of components we have, the massive amount of configurations within one rack or even one server. One server type can have many, many ways because we work on optimizing a lot of different things. So when we need to actually report our Scope 3 emission and understand where we can actually act and reduce our carbon footprint, we need something systematic. And as you said, we need to compare apples to apples, which is not easy when we get thousands of different data sources from hundreds of different suppliers, different way of calculating LCAs. So the main, I would say, novelty we had was to assign data quality scoring to each of the inputs we have for the components and compare the data we have. And then we have a mechanism, an algorithm that will use different types of methodology to find components that are similar, look alike, and try to infer the carbon footprint of that component. And then a methodology to aggregate from a single screw to the whole fleet. And what we're trying to do here together is making sure we all use the same methodology, because then when we work on reporting, all of our companies report our Scope 3 emissions. We just had the Meta Sustainability Report out, I think 2 days ago. We want to make sure that when we're speaking about our emissions, we are using the same method, because otherwise it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, fully agree with everything Lisa Ines mentioned on scalability and standard approach to make sure that we understand our fleet. Also, it applies to future modeling, because we all want to understand what's our future emissions and be able to basically track and forecast different scenarios. And again, we need parameterized LCAs for that to digest the primary supplier-specific data that Alan mentioned that we are all standardizing and collecting, and then using that to forecast future. What if we switch to clean energy? What if we increase the recycled content? So again, with those parameterized LCAs, we are able to forecast the future and plan for how can we basically reduce our emissions together and improve.
Awesome. I know I don't have a lot of time left, but I did want to ask the panelists if somebody has an example of a real-world example where some LCA data has been used in order to change some design or optimize something that you can share with us.
Yeah, I have an example. We're on my team working on a new process called Design for Sustainability, and for now, every new racks that has to go to approval for going into mass production has to go to a sustainability assessment with a part of my team, and we work on finding alternatives that could be extending the life or reusing or using greener components. So we have different alternatives. Storage components are very, very important because the carbon footprint are very disproportionately high compared to any other components due to the numbers we have, the manufacturing process, everything. So this is usually what we try to focus on, and I'm not even talking about memory and DRAMs because that's a huge portion also. So we recently rework entirely the design of a new compute rack, and we were able to reduce the Scope 3 emission by 25% by applying a list of different combinations of using green steel, reusing the whole rack frame, and harvesting memory. So the DRAMs, we have a program for that and making sure we can use that. We couldn't do that without the LCA at scale, because to make sure that we are making an impact within numbers, and the numbers need to actually matter. So this is the LCA at scale methodology that we're discussing that we used as a baseline to do the calculation and make sure that we were actually doing something meaningful.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes, go ahead, and after that, I'm just going to ask them to wrap up because I got a signal.
Yeah. Before we get away from this, I just want to thank Trudy for organizing this panel.
Oh, no,
SNIA has been working on green storage for over 20 years. It's great to see, all of you moving on with this, and that's really good news for all of us. I really hope that you can bring the panel back next year to where we can get it scheduled on main stage. I know there's some scheduling One of the things, I think most of us in the audience who've been in SDC for a long time will recognize something we've also been working on, which is improving the speaker demographics here. So really happy to see what you see on stage right now. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, all the panelists, for giving your time. And specifically, I know all of them are actually collaborating and working on this OCP initiative that's kicking off. So I'm hoping that when we get a chance to come back next year, we'll have progress done and some standardization on the way coming in. We'll be able to share that with you. Is there any parting thoughts, messages panelists would just want to wrap up with?
No, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much,
Great
audience.
questions, thank you.
We loved your
Thank you so
questions. Anything else, feel free to reach out.